Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our free webinar regarding the introduction of GHS implementation in Asia. This webinar is offered by CIRS and my name is Brian Zhou, the Senior Regulatory Consultant of Industrial Chemical Department in CIRS. Before we begin our today's topic, please let me introduce our company briefly. CIRS is short for Chemical Inspection and Regulation Service Company Limited. Our main offices are both in China and Ireland, and we have more than 120 employees. Our main services are providing the product registration and regulatory compliance service for Europe and Asia area. In our company, there are several business units: the industrial chemicals, the cosmetics, the pesticides and biocides, the food contact and food, medical devices, and some other units. Specifically to the China reach, we sales already help the enterprises accomplish more than 60 typical notification and several hundred simplified notification, which made us a leading service provider in China. And to the global GH compliance service, we sales accomplishes more than 3,000 SDS every year in Asia area. Okay, now let's back to today's topic. I will mainly introduce GHS implementation of 4 Asia countries, and I will also introduce GHS implementation in some other countries. The total numbers are 10. This webinar will cover the GHS standard, the implementation date, special requirements of SDS and labeling in different countries. So hope this webinar can help you comply with GHS requirements in Asia area. Okay. As is known to all, GHS is short for Globally Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals. There are 3 main parts: the classification, the SDS, and the labeling. The UN GHS is updated every 2 years, and the newest edition is Revision 6, which is published in 2015. Generally, in most countries, their GHS standards are based on UN GHS. The first country I will introduce is China. In China, the main regulation on chemical hazards on hazardous chemicals is Decree number 591, the regulation on safe management of hazardous chemicals in China. In this regulation, there is a special part for SDS and labeling. Also, there is a supplementary regulation called SAWS Order number 53, the measures for administration of hazardous chemicals registration. So under these regulations, the China government made the national standard for classification, SDS, labeling, and inventory. The national standard for classification is GB 30,000 series, which is implemented on November 11, 2014. The national standard for SDS are GB 16483 2008 and GB 17519 2013, which are implemented on February 1, 2009. The national standard of labeling is GB 15258 2009, which is implemented from May 1, 2010, and it has a transition period till to the April 30, 2011. Lastly, the inventory. The newest edition, the category of hazardous chemicals 2015, just updated in this year. So if you want to check your chemicals in the hazardous chemicals catalog, please use the newest edition. Generally, GHS will be used in several parts in China: the import and export, the hazardous chemicals registration, the hazardous chemical safety permit, the information communication in supply chain, and other parts. So we can see that GHS plays a very important role in chemical business communication in China, especially for hazardous chemicals. Okay, to the classification in China, as I just mentioned, the national standard is called GB 30,000 series, which is implemented in last year. It is fully based on UN GHS Revision 4, which has 28 hazard classification, just like the UN GHS. Here I post a picture compare the EU CRP and China GHS. The differences are in 8 hazard classification. For example, to the classification flammable gases, the EU CRP only have 2 categories, the category 1 and 2, but China GHS has 4. In August this year, there's another there's another sheet called there's a sheet called Information Sheet of Hazardous Chemicals Classification was published. This is an official classification that contains 2,828 kinds of hazardous chemicals. If your chemical is listed in this sheet, you'd better use the official classification to comply the GHS requirement in China. So from this sheet, you can see it consists of the serial number, chemical name, liquid name, English name, case number, hazardous classification, and remark. Please pay attention that if your chemical is highly toxic, it will be marked on the remark column. And to the SDS, the national standard is called, the two national standards are called National Standard on Safety Data Sheet for Chemical Products and Guidance on the Completion of Safety Data Sheet for Chemical Products. The China SDS is based on the UN SDS format, which has 16 sections, and every headings of the sections are the same as the UN SDS format. But it also has its own special requirement, except for the language requirement. One special part is the one Chinese domestic 24-hour emergency number is required. So to the foreign manufacturer, you also need to find a 24-hour emergency number in China to add it on your SDS. Besides, in section 3, you need to put your ingredients as a descending order based on the value of volume fraction or concentration range. And it also has a requirement of CBI. So to the labeling requirement, to the labeling in China, the national standard is following the national standard on general rules for preparation or precautionary label for chemicals. Except for the language requirement and the 24-hour emergency phone number like the SDS. It has an order requirement on hazardous statements. It should follow the physical hazards, health hazards, and the environmental hazards. The label in China is based, the size of label in China is based on the package capacity. Especially if your capacity is less than 100 milliliter, you can use a simplified label. Here I put two examples. The first is a general label. You can see the element distribution here, including the product identification, the single word, picogram, hazard statement, precautionary statement, supply information, and emergency phone number. The second is a simplified label. Compared to the general label, the precautionary statement is omitted. Okay, now let's go through the GHS in Korea. The Korea GHS is under 3 regulations: the Occupational Safety and Health Act, made by Ministry of Employment and Labor, Toxicochemicals Control Act, made by Ministry of Environment, and Hazardous Materials Act, made by National Emergency Management Agency. Its own national standard is called MOEL Notice Number 2013-37, which is based on UN GHS Revision 3. And please pay attention that the Korea is fully implemented the GHS on August 14, 2013. Although it's based on the UN GHS, the building blocks still exist. Compared to the UN GHS Revision 4, there are 6 hazard classifications are not adopted in Korea GHS. So please be careful when you compare with the GHS requirement in Korea. To the classification, there is a list. There is a compulsory list, which is called amended list of GHS classification and labeling of toxicochemicals. It's made by the government and they post it on website. So you can go to the website to download this list. You can check your chemicals by the chemical number and the class number. So you can see the classification and some other requirements of your chemical from this list. Also to the SDS requirement, the language requirement is a little different in Korea. If your chemicals is used for research and development in laboratory, the product name, substance name, and foreign supplies contract information can be written in English. And also pay attention that all the 6 headings and the hazard and precautionary statement should be addressed. Especially in section 3, you can use the ranges to replace the concentration of ingredients, although it's not mandatory. The range is 5%. For example, if your concentration is 7%, you can use the range 2% to 12% to replace the value of 5%. And if the contents are less than 5%, the lower limit should be indicated as more than 1%. So for example, if your concentration is 3%, you can use the range 1% to 8% to replace the value 3%. However, if your chemical is a CMR substance, the lower limit should be replaced by the cutoff values. For example, to the carcinogens and germ-cell mutagens, the lower limit should be the 0.1%. In addition, there is also a CBI requirement in Korea SDS. Hazards must be fully disclosed, although the substance name and class number can be hidden. Okay, to the labeling, here I put an example of Korea lab here. And you can see that the product identifier should be consistent with SDS. And it has a special requirement for the number of picograms and the precautionary statements. Both are not mandatory, but you should notice that if you have 5 or more picograms, you can use up to 4 picograms in your label. And if you have 7 or more precautionary statements, you can use up to 6 precaution statements in your label. Besides, you need to add a sentences which says point to the SDS for 4 statements. Besides, you need to add the supply information. The contract information of a Korean legal entity should be required. And in the last part, to the package size, to the label size is still based on the package capacity. But if your capacity is lower than 100 milliliter, you can use the small package label, which the hazard and precautionary statements are omitted. Okay, thirdly, we will go through the Japanese GHS. Like Korea, there are also it's also under three regulations in the industrial safety and health law, the poisonous and the dilatory substance control law, and the pollutant release and transfer register. In Japan, there are some laws regarding chemicals have special requirements for the chemicals. Generally, there is a chemical list in these regulations, and also the SDS and labeling requirements are mentioned in these laws. So you need to pay attention to these laws when you compare with the Japanese GHS. And to its own standard of GHS, the classification is following the GISZ 7252-2014 classification of chemicals, which is implemented from March 25, 2014. Both labeling and SDS are following the GISZ 7253-2012 hazard communication of chemicals, which is implemented from March 26, 2012. All the parts will be mandatory on January 1st, 2017. These standards are based on UNGHS Relation 4, and it also have some building blocks, so you'll need to be careful on this part. As I just mentioned, some laws in Japan regarding chemicals have the requirements on GHS. So you may wonder what I should. So you may wonder which laws I should pay attention when I compare with the GHS requirements in Japan. So the government made a platform called Chemical Risk Information Platform. Here is the website. And in this website, there are two options. The first one is total search. You can use the chemical name, the class number, or the easy number to search your chemicals, and you will get all the classification and other requirements in different regulations. Or you can just go through the list option. Then you can find all the lists in different regulations, and all the chemicals are in this list. Secondly, to the special requirements of SDS in Japan, you need to pay attention that in section 15, additional information in section 15, not all the regulations can be added in this part. The government made a list of regulations which can be put in this section. And you should also notice that in every sections, relevant information should be added. And if the information is unavailable, the reason should be stated. Okay. It also can the SDS it can also do the CBI production. However, if your chemical substance has some hazard classification below, like the respiratory sanitizing or skin sanitizing substance more than 0.1%, you need to show this substance on your SDS. Then to the labeling, if your chemical substances are not harmful to the health and the environment, you can use the generic name to replace the true name. And also, if it's possible, you can add the domestic regulation on the label in Japan. Okay, so in the last part of Japan GHS, I just list all the 10 regulations which can be listed in section 15. Now let's move to the GHS in Taiwan. Taiwan GHS is under two parts, the Occupational Safety and Health Act and the Toxic or Chemical Substance Control Act. The national standard of classification is called CNS 15030. This standard has many editions, and the newest edition is updated on January 26, 2015. And both labeling and SDS are following the standard called Regulations of Labeling and Hazardous Communication of Hazardous Chemicals, which made by Ministry of Labor. It's implemented from July 3rd, 2014. And the GHS in Taiwan have a transition period until to the January 1st, 2016. To reduce the pressure of enterprises on complying the GHS requirements in Taiwan, the Ministry of Labor in Taiwan just published the 3 phases of hazardous chemicals. This will make the Taiwan GHS be accomplished step by step. Every phases of hazardous chemicals will be mandatory after a transition period. To the first phases, it has 1,062 chemicals and it's mandatory from January 1st, 2010. The second phase has 1,089 chemicals, which is mandatory from January 1st, 2012. To the third phase, it has 1,020 chemicals, which is mandatory from January 1st, 2015. Except these chemical substances except these chemicals in the 3 phases, other hazardous chemicals have to comply with the GHS from January 1st, 2017. So to the requirement of SDS in Taiwan, except for the language should be traditional Chinese, it also requires that the name should be both in Chinese and English. And emergency phone number is also required. And the special part is that your SDS should be reviewed every 3 years, and your update record and execution record of SDS should also be preserved for 3 years. And to the labeling, here is an example, and from the example you can find that the language is in traditional Chinese, just like the SDS, and the substance name is both in Chinese and English. And please pay attention that not all the products need the label. For example, if your product is a consumer product, you don't need a label. And to the small package, which is less than 100 milliliters, the labeling can only offer the information of product identifier, picogram, and single word. So in the last part of GHS in Taiwan, I'd like to talk later about the CBI production. From the information we received, the apply of CBI production will be studied in this year, and the government will issue the relative application form and procedure also in this year. So if you want to apply the CBI production to MOL for approve, you need to submit the information including the name and the concentration of hazardous chemical ingredients and the name of manufacturer, importer, or suppliers. However, it doesn't mean that all the chemicals can apply the CBI production. Here are 9 hazardous classification. If your chemical has any one of the classification in this list, you can apply the CBI production. Okay, so the next chapter I will briefly introduce the GHS implementation in other Asian countries. In this part, there are 6 countries. The first is Vietnam. Um, their classification and SDS are following the standard called Circular Number 04/2012 (TTBCT), which is implemented from March 30, 2012. And to the substance, the transition period is till to March 30, 2014, and to the mixture, the transition period is till to the March 30, 2016. And the labeling is following the national standard called Circular Number 28/2010 (TTBCT), which is implemented on August 16, 2010. Till the transition period is till to the January 1st, 2011. Although the standards are all based on UN GHS Revision 3, it has many own requirements on both SDS and labeling. To the SDS, the first thing you should pay attention is in Section 2, the order of Section 2 and Section 3 are reversed in Vietnam's SDS. And to the language requirement, except for it should be in Vietnamese, it also needs an original or English version of the producer. In addition, besides, to the SDS, all the pages should be numbered, and the steps of the producer or importer should be required on every 2 adjoining pages. Lastly, last part is in section 3. You don't need to offer the accurate concentration value. You can use the range to replace the value. For example, you can use the 0.1 to 1%, 0.5 to 1.5%, and so on. And to the labeling, you should add many information on your label in Vietnam, like the quantity, the data of the manufacturer, the expiration date, the origins of goods, instruction for use and preservation. Specifically to the small packages, the precautionary statements and the instruction for use and preservation can be omitted. However, you need to record it in an accompanying document with the label. Then I will go through the Thailand. The GHS standard is called Hazardous Classification and Communication System of Hazardous Substance BE2555, which is also called Ministry Regulation Number 14, 2012. The GHS in Thailand is implemented from March 13, 2012. And to the substance, the transition period is till to March 13, 2013, and to the mixtures is till to the March 13, 2017. The standard is based on UNGS Regulation 3, and it don't have too much special requirements, especially to the labeling. If you have if it's possible, if it's available, a UN purpose shipping name is required. Besides, just remember that the language should be in Thai. Then we will talk about Indonesia. The national standard is called Decree of Ministry of Industry Number 23, 2013, which is implemented on July 12, 2013. And to the substance, the transition period is till to March 24, 2010, and to the mixture, it's till to the December 31st, 2016. The standard is based on UNGS Revision 4, and to the SDS and the labeling, they have the same requirement on language, which means the language must be in Bahasa Indonesian, and you should also add it international language, which can be used as an official language of the UN. Besides, you need to remember that your SDS and labeling should be reviewed every 5 years, or if you made any changes of on your SDS or labeling, it should be reviewed again. Besides, especially to the labeling, the size of letters and pictograms should be proportional. Okay, the next one I will talk about is the Singapore. The national standard is called SS 586 2014, the specification for hazardous communication for hazardous chemicals and dangerous goods. To the substance, the implementation is February 1st, 2012. The mixture is July 1st, 2015. And especially to the users, the mixture of users, it should be July 1st, 2016. And all the chemicals should have a 1 year transition period. And the national standard is based on UNGHS Revision 4. To the requirements of SDS in Singapore, the language should be English, and the emergency phone number and the local address and contact number should all be required. And you should also remember that the SDS should be reviewed every 5 years. To the labeling, you need to make sure that your labeling will be understood by all the persons in workplace. And the label in Singapore it also depends on the package capacity. So to the small package, which is less than 125 milliliters, you can only offer the information of product identifier, the picogram, and you need to add a sentence which is referred to SDS for additional information. The next one is GHS in Malaysia. The national standard is called the Industrial Code of Practice on Chemical Classification and Hazardous Communication, which is also called ICOP. It's based on UNGHS Revision 3, which is implemented on October 11th, 2013, and the transition period is till to the April 17th, 2015. To the requirement of SDS and labeling, except for the language should be both in national language and English, it has many requirements on hazardous picogram size, and it has special requirement on hazardous picogram size. In SDS, the size should be at least 1 centimeter multiplied 1 centimeter and less than 2 centimeter multiplied 2 centimeter. And in label, it should be 1/15 of the surface area, but the minimum area is not less than 100 square millimeter. Besides, to the labeling, you need to be careful that the font size of the letter and the number should not be smaller than 7 points, and the color should be black. Besides, generally, the number of precautionary statements should not more than 6 on the label, and it also have a requirement on small package, which the package capacity is less than 125 milliliters. If it's a small package, your label can omit the hazard and the precautionary statements, and you also need to add a sentence called "read SDS before use," just like the Singapore. Okay, so the last one is Philippines. The national standard is called Guidance for the Implementation of GHS in Chemical Safety Program in the Workplace. And it's implemented on March 14th, 2014, and it has a 1 year transition period till to the March 14th, 2015. It's based on the latest UNGHS, and it seems they don't have special requirements on SDS and labeling. However, It cause it cause the edition confusion in workplace because it only says the latest edition UNGHS. But as we all know that UNGHS is updated every 2 years, so the manufacturer and company don't know which specific edition they should follow. Besides, in this year, another department in Philippines called DNR, the Philippines Department of Natural Resources, they issued an order called 2015-009, and this order is covering all toxicochemical substances in Philippines. However, it doesn't solve the problems of edition confusions. So my suggestion is, if you want to comply the GHS requirement in Philippines, you'd better ask the relevant department first. Okay, in summary, all the 10 countries in these slides, their standards are based on UNGHS. To China, Japan, Taiwan, Indonesia, and Singapore, they are based on version 4. And to Korea, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, and Philippines, their standards are based on version 3. Besides, you should be careful that except for China, Korea, and Malaysia, other countries are still in transition period. And although all the countries standards are based on UNGHS, most countries still have building blocks to are not adopted. And except the Philippines, every country has its own requirement. So when you trying to comply the GHS requirement in Asia, you should be familiar with every national standard of GHS and their own requirement. Okay. This is the whole part of the webinar today. Our next webinar will be on December 16th, 2015, regarding the GHS and chemical-related consumer products labeling in China. If you are interested, please look at our website and register it.